there's some peculiarities in each type of account settings. One is your privileged users. Those are the administrators, because even if you set up Office 365, you will have one tech lead or one engineer who will have administrative access into Office 365 your account, right? And they can give access to other users. So that's what I call a privileged user, right? So they need to have a very strong identity, right? So recommendation is always for them to enforce MFA, because many of these providers will give you a way to set up a multi-factor authentication for your privileged users, right? So that's highly recommended to set up for privileged users. And we need to be having a shorter rotation of their credentials and other things to ensure, even if their credentials are lost or they move jobs, we have a process to rotate the credentials and change them at a higher frequency, higher rate. The second category are the end users. Those could be your customers, or those could be your other employees who are using that service. So definitely they need to be, you should be setting up, and this is a lot of configurations you can do in your setup for that particular service, where you choose for a strong credentials with some rotations needed or required as part of it. MFA, I recommend it, right, wherever, or you should provide an option to use MFA. To take an example of that, right, so if I think most of us are using some bank or other and using their online services, if you go, right, they allow you as a customer, they allow you to use a strong password, but they also allow you or encourage you to set up a MFA where they can send a pin or some notification via your mobile device or others, right, so that you have a stronger form of credentials or setup. And then some of the applications, when you build it, right, you sometimes have a choice where you're not managing your, depending on the kind of application or kind of um, business model you have, right? Some of the models use delegated identities, which means like, okay, I don't want to manage identity. I say, okay, you can log in as your Google identity or your Facebook identity or other things, right? That's another kind of area where you need to be careful on how you set it up and configure it, right? So those from the end user perspective. The third one, which I also want to say, and this has been becoming an increasing place of compromise, right, or where the breaches happen, and are the API keys, because nowadays applications are kind of mixture of all these web services or RESTful APIs which are talking to each other, right, for the automation. So there are a number of API keys which gets used in the backend, which has privileged access into your applications. So that those are the kind of things, right, which you need to be very careful about. Okay, what are your API keys, right? So there are some best practices, do's and don'ts I want to talk about here, right? Not embedding your keys in the code, right? So you should always ensure, and that has been a mistake which has been seen, right, as well as in the code repos. So one of the, if you ask me, that has been one of the issue I deal with, right, within the different teams I work across, right, where some developer by mistake put a key in their source code or checking in their repos, right, and that gets kind of published. And now suddenly some other people may have access to those keys. And generally those API keys have elevated privileges, right, to do various things. Not encoding those API keys in URLs, especially since URLs get cached, right? So if I have a URL that may get cached in proxies or get cached in browsers and other things, not using any of those keys, right? And periodically expiring those keys is also important. It may have an operational burden if I say, okay, expire all your keys every 90 days or 45 days. Definitely it's kind of cumbersome, but from security, it gives you a bigger head start because your API keys are getting rotated, right? And if someone accidentally puts it, it gets kind of, the risk becomes lower as soon as it gets rotated automatically. So that's our number two thing, right? After kind of going to a cloud provider to have the strong identity setup in your SaaS application.
For more information, click on the link below or visit databrackets.com.